I'm your host Sukriti Advanshi. Thank you so much for tuning in to the TechGeek podcast. As AI innovations become more relevant, the impact AI is having on the developer community is hard to ignore. Now, ChatGPT, which is like one of the most trending things on the internet these days, is not here to replace any traditional developers or software engineers, but to provide tools that eliminate repetitive tasks and accelerate time to market for app development. Additionally, with the new technologies and innovation surfacing at an unprecedented rate, it has become imperative for tech enthusiasts across industries to equip themselves with the in demand and futuristic skills. Therefore, it is plausible to conclude that the future of AI in programming is one of helpers too, rather than replacements of programmers. Now, that being said, I would like to welcome our guest speaker for this episode, and I'm delighted to have Deepak Visweswaraiah, who is the Vice President, Platform Engineering and Site Managing Director from Pegasystems. Hello, Deepak. Welcome to the TechGeek podcast.
Good morning, Sukriti. Thank you so much for that warm welcome and incredibly energizing discussion. And I don't think there is a day that goes by without really talking about the impact of what is going on in the AI, field and how generative AI is taken the world by storm and what have you. And really appreciate being invited to speak on this podcast here from TechGeek. So I'm excited about it.
Thank you so much, Deepak. I completely echo your thoughts that not a single day, passes by when we don't talk about, we don't write about, or we don't discuss about AI. Now, I would like to quickly jump onto the questions that I have for you. And to start with, what are your thoughts about an AI, powered coding revolution that we are trying to look at? And should we reevaluate how we currently develop softwares?
Yeah, great question about a lot of myths that are being formed too, right? So it is good to be able to kind of peel that onion a little bit. Firstly, let me give a couple of data points in terms of the macro trends that are happening, right? This is not necessarily from a coding revolution perspective, but overall AI related, right? If you look at AI, it is estimated to add somewhere about $500 billion to the economy by 2025. And that's just 2 years down the road, right? It's being utilized to do so many different things apart from increasing efficiency or saving cost or improving customer experience or across various industries. Doesn't matter what you look at, whether it is healthcare, finance, retail, etc. Right? I think a recent Goldman Sachs report actually talked about just the generative artificial intelligence, right? The generative AI part could contribute as much as about 7 trillion US dollars, or about 7% of the global GDP in the next 8 to 10 years, right? So there is obviously a huge impact that it is expected to create. Now, let's actually boil that down to the question about coding revolution in terms of how does it impact software development, or what do we look at it look at from that perspective, right? The coding landscape, if you step back and look at it, has changed dramatically over the last probably a decade or two, right? A lot of automation tools for programmers have matured to a large extent, in its scope, in its ability to be able to help developers. Due to the radically faster workflows, these tools are now almost deemed essential for programmers, right? So good examples are like GitHub or Jenkins or various other tools like that. So think I would love for software developers to think AI as another tool that can help them in their everyday development, deployment activities, or what have you, right? Every developer can now code in pretty much any popular language, different train models, solve common problems in much smaller time, in a fraction of the time than what it would have taken otherwise years ago, right? In 2023, alone, I believe that the demand for software engineers rose by about 17% across all industries. So there is nothing. It's not like software development jobs are going away. It's only because there is so much demand still from a demand and supply point of view that we continue to see increase in the demand for software engineers to that end, right? So plenty of things going on, in that aspect. So let's think about it in terms of what is the impact of these AI-powered solutions, or purely from a coding revolution, as you asked about it, right? I think of a few areas. One, I think increased productivity. AI-powered coding tools can automate repetitive tasks. It can generate code templates. It can refactor code. It can debug. It can do a few things that can actually help developers save time and focus on probably higher complex, more engineering, serious problem-solving capabilities that need to happen, right? So this leads to increased productivity and faster development cycle, if you will. Second, I would say is enhanced code quality. What AI tools can do, they can also analyze code patterns, they can identify bugs, they can suggest improvements, and then by leveraging some of the machine learning algorithms that are there or that are built into some of these tools can detect common coding mistakes, right? They can optimize a little bit of the code structure. They can enforce some best practices that are designed by an organization, right? These kind of things can lead to improved code quality, being able to develop with fewer bugs, and then better, ability to maintain code for that matter, right? That's the second thing. I would say thirdly, code generation and completion. These days, especially generative AI models like ChatGPT or GPT-3, GPT-4, what have you, they are capable of being able to generate code snippets or complete code based on a context or existing patterns, if you will, right? This feature particularly is useful when developers are working on repetitive tasks or, let's say, unfamiliar code bases, right? If somebody joined a new company and they need to be able to go understand this code and debug this code, they could leverage that help. And so it accelerates, that coding process, reducing errors, what have you, and then helps in learning newer, whether it is programming languages or new products or frameworks or what have you, right? Fourth is smarter code refactoring. One of the areas where generative AI technology can be used well is in terms of code refactoring by automatically suggesting optimizations, identifying duplicate code, and things like that in terms of looking for alternative implementations, if you will, right? These tools can analyze large code bases and then propose refactoring changes that improve performance, potentially readability, maintainability. You can ask these generative AI algorithms to format your code, to add comments based on the context and things like that, right? And lastly, it can help in bug detection, intelligent bug detection and debugging. A lot of the AI algorithms can analyze code and identify potential, vulnerabilities, based on some of the security vulnerabilities that are reported, elsewhere in public or what have you, and then it can bring those things into picture. They can assist in debugging and tracing such, bugs that are in the code for that matter, which can help speed up the debugging process for a developer. These are probably ones I would say where there's been a significant impact, from leveraging generative AI. I do want to say, while AI-powered coding solutions offer a lot of benefits that we talked about, it is important to note that it's not really meant to replace human developers, right? Instead, I think, as you said in the opening line, they serve as powerful tools to augment and enhance developers' capabilities, making that coding process more efficient and productive. All said and done, human expertise, the creativity, the critical thinking, all of them remain very vital in software development. And AI tools can actually be seen as assistants to support such coding practices. I would probably be remiss if I didn't mention a couple of things that think about in terms of what AI-powered tools cannot do today, as well, just so the developers can understand some of that too. Is that they cannot really bring the high-level conceptual understanding, right? AI tools probably will struggle to comprehend such high-level conceptual understanding that humans can do, or have that broader context of a project when looking at looking at things in a broader perspective. Things like creativity and innovation, right? AI tools are primarily designed to work based on patterns and based on existing data and based on what they're trained on. They're not outside of that realm. They can't be creative or innovative. That's only comes from human mind. Things like business logic and domain-specific knowledge, right? Again, AI-powered, coding solutions may not have the domain-specific knowledge because they are trained on what they're trained on, right? And then they may not be able to understand the complex business logic that may come from years and years of, business knowledge of humans. And ethical decision making, right, is another important aspect. Yeah, algorithms are limited, by the data that they are trained on. So it is important to be able to understand what they are trained on, and are there any bias in terms of the decisions that are being made by these systems. And lastly, the user experience and design. You can't really bring that mind of design and user experience of humans completely into a tool. That essentially doesn't exist today, right? So these are some of the things that software developers should really think. Despite all of the revolution or the impact that we talk about from generative AI, there is a lot of value, and it can actually help software developers as we move forward. I know it was a little bit of a longer answer, but I hope I answered that question well.
Absolutely, Deepak, and I think it required a lot of attention. Reason being, we're also talking about how we need to reevaluate the current software development arena, and how you want to maybe just try reworking and innovate that space entirely. So thank you so much for that. Moving on to the next one of the most trending things, ChatGPT, that I would want you to actually talk about. Could you just try and demystify the ChatGPT explosion and its overall adoption in India right now?
Sure, absolutely. Like we talked about earlier, probably every school kid or college kid these days knows about ChatGPT. Just to set the context here, the ChatGPT explosion, and its adoption essentially refers to the widespread adoption and popularity of what we refer to as large language models, LLMs in short. Whether you refer to GPT-3 or GPT-4 or what have you, which have significantly advanced capabilities of AI, right? Like, for example, the GPT-3 or GPT-4 developed by OpenAI is essentially a state-of-the-art large language model that can generate very human-like text responses. I think that is what is important, generating those human-like, text responses when it is given a prompt or when it's given an input, right? It is kind of safe to assume that ChatGPT's payment adoption in the Indian IT market is likely a reflection of this broader trend globally towards the increased investment in AI and related technologies in India, which compares, companies are increasingly investing in to stay ahead of the curve in such a dynamic market that is changing by the day. I talked about some of the investment, like the 500 billion to the economy in the next couple of years, in 2025. That's just, in 2 years, right? Further, if you think about like the latest version GPT-4 of this ChatGPT, with about 1.5 billion parameters, it's the first of a series of large-scale language models deployed by OpenAI. And this makes it one of the most powerful, large language models, right? Allowing it to generate more and more human-like text, outputs, if you will. Right? This adoption of large language models, or the ChatGPT like models, right, in India has been pretty notable, with organizations and developers exploring various applications and use cases, just because we have such a large ecosystem of software developers, right? I mean, we obviously have one of the largest ecosystem of software developers, right? So what are the factors that are contributing to the adoption of ChatGPT in various parts of technology that as software developers that we are used to? I would probably say one versatile, conversational AI, right? You can use GPT-3 or GPT-4, and engage in a dynamic and context-aware conversations. Conversations are actually happening so much more easier, both, especially from a conversation perspective or even voice perspective, right? It's making it a lot more suitable for a wide range of applications, from chatbots to virtual assistants to customer support applications, what have you. These models are used heavily to be able to generate those responses in real time, for that matter, in most of these things. And then it creates a lot more personalized experiences. That is one aspect of it, right? Second is improved language understanding. It's amazing in terms of some of these models like ChatGPT has demonstrated pretty good language understanding capabilities, enabling it to comprehend and generate text in multiple languages, including most of our Indian languages. This versatility kind of makes it very appealing for our business and developers in India because of our requirement of multilingual support. If you look at it from a Indian context, it's great. That support is often critical, for us. Third is probably code generation that I talked about earlier, code generation and that assistance. GPT-3 or GPT-4, or what we refer to as ChatGPT, can assist with code generation, providing developers with smaller snippets of codes and solutions for programming problems, right? This functionality is particularly valuable where large and diverse developer community that I spoke about in India, right? They can benefit from these features. Think of citizen developers, especially developers who are not necessarily deeply technically trained. Let's say there is a person who has been in the insurance industry who understands the business aspect of it, but would want to try and develop some code, or does want to be able to understand or develop an application. They could really do that with the help of some of these tools, right? That is becoming possible these days. And lastly, I would say accessibility and developer community, right? The availability of ChatGPT, especially these models through APIs and developer platforms, has made it so much more accessible to a broader range of people. Now, you don't have to be a complete, geek or a software developer to be able to access these things, right? To be able to access these models. Now, there are interfaces or other tools which we will talk about, like low-code platforms and what have you, that integrate these kind of tools into a larger platform and give that accessibility to a much bigger developer community, if you will, right? And this has fueled a lot of experimentation and collaboration within the developer community to try new things out, to encourage innovation and exploring new applications and new use cases, what have you, right? So, so it's important to note that while I talk about these ChatGPT tools as that offer powerful language generation capabilities, still has limitations, still has potential ethical concerns that we talked about earlier, right? Right? These models require careful validation, monitoring, human oversight to ensure that the content is accurate and unbiased, and then make sure that we are following ethical standards. So, but can leverage, as a really tools, and I hope that helps, for people to understand a little bit of this whole the Chat GPT explosion and how it is adopted, or what are some of the factors that is resulting in such a wider adoption, especially in India.
Absolutely, Deepak. And I'm sure, the kind of adoption that we are looking at, of course, it's massive and trending, but the overall preview, what, experts like you think and you guys are working on is also very critical. Moving on to the next one. With the latest technologies like generative AI and low code at helm, what is the future of app development? You have also, touched base about generative AI in the very first question, but,
Yeah.
how do you think the future of app development overall looks like?
Fantastic question. I think it's a great follow-up to what we talked about in terms of what is the future of application development, and especially with technologies like generative AI and low code, at the top, right? So think about this in terms of, the convergence, especially of low code platforms leveraging generative AI functionalities, I think have contributed to an increased efficiency and faster development cycles of applications. Let's step back in terms of, think about the journey, right? Software engineers used to develop an application from scratch. So every time we wanted to build an application, we would build it from scratch and build everything. Every line of code that was to be written, had to be written by a software developer or a team of developers. And it took months or years to develop a simple application, in the IT world. Then came some of these low-code platforms, like one of the things that we offered, like Pega Infinity, came and made this development of application a lot simpler. You can develop applications in weeks or days using such low-code platforms, which was ideal for IT departments given the pressures of the business, because businesses wanted these applications to be developed quicker, faster, better. So while this, evolution was happening with low-code platforms, what happened in parallel is the development of AI ML technology, including, in terms of natural language processing, as well as using that to be able to create predictive analytics and adaptive analytics and what have you. All of them came together, right? And really was advanced a lot in terms of how that technology was introduced or developed, right? Now, having said that, it really required specialists and experts to understand, to handle all of this AI ML technology, and to be able to use it in your day-to-day development, and in building applications. Now, the generative AI features that I talked about, combined with low-code platforms, these two technologies converging, and being able to have the ability of generative AI features, available through such low-code platforms for, easier, not so deeply technical people to be able to leverage such features. It has accelerated the potential of being able to develop application even faster. AI is now available to developers who don't need to know or understand that technology deeply, and simply can use interfaces that make it available to them to a large extent, to be able to democratize, AI to that extent, right? So low-code platforms allows individuals with limited programming experience, let's say, to be able to create such applications. This democratization, as I can say, can open opportunities for a broader range of people in India to build more and more apps faster, in an increased, innovation and entrepreneurship environment. These technologies can provide flexibility, for developers to create highly targeted or as well as a very broader set of use cases, that are user centric, in different verticals, right? It will help in terms of being able to prototype, and, in an iterative development, methodology, where generative AI tools can automatically generate some of these code snippets or applications for that matter. Developers can test and refine their applications quickly, in a faster environment, right? All of these are good. Having said that, I think there is still a need for computer science fundamentals, in order to build applications that can run at scale, that can be resilient, that can perform as the applications were envisioned, right? And then you asked it in terms of the future of application development, right? We can expect that the future of application can actually significantly be impacted by technologies, as I talked about, both generative AI or low code, no code platforms, right? Some key aspects that may reshape completely some of the application development, facets, or one, I talked about accelerated development processes, using these in a low code. Now you can actually develop in hours or days, at the most weeks, completely new applications that can address new use cases. Secondly, increased accessibility and democratization. I talked about the ability of software developers who may not necessarily, or even non-software developers, think about citizen developers, empowering citizen developers, and then some of them having this accessibility and ability to be able to democratize UI, AI as such in building these applications. I think that is going to be a huge impact, that will cause change in the future of application development. More and more citizen developers, who have great business knowledge, will actually be able to develop applications without having to go through as much of technical knowledge understanding as they would. But although it still will need some for sure. I think there will be a good amount of bridging the IT skills gap. Right, these technologies and tools will help to bridge some of the skills gap that exists today in allowing citizen developers or other people roles like that to be able to build applications. I think one important aspect, I think it will help in the future, you will see larger collaboration between developers and business stakeholders as citizen developers or business knowledge people come closer to be able to develop software, and the software developers to be able to leverage all of such technology features. I think that collaboration is going to become stronger. I think that's a great that's a great thing from a future perspective. And then lastly, I think rapid prototyping and iteration. I think that will definitely be very helpful in making it, doing it quicker and what have you. I think I would summarize saying it's important to note while low code and generative AI technologies offer a lot of advantages, they may not necessarily be applicable for every application. That may not be the it's not a panacea, if you will. It's not the one that is suited to develop every application. There are complex or highly specialized applications that may be there that may still require traditional coding approaches. It's not like you would never use that. However, the increasing adoption of low-code platforms and generative AI is likely there to reshape the application development landscape as we move into the future, making it more accessible, making it more efficient, making it more collaborative. As I said, I think that's what we are looking at as the future.
Okay. Now, moving on to the last one, since you've spoken about the app development and you've touched base a little bit about the developers here, tell us how it actually has impacted a software engineer's role, and what can they actually do to upskill themselves to stay relevant in today's time.
Great question. It's all about staying relevant, isn't it? Yeah, this is an interesting aspect in terms of how does software engineers' role change, and what should we really be looking for, right? Very recently, I was, I think this was probably in the last year. I was looking at this research report, right? I think GitHub reported, in terms of from a research point of view, that 88% of the users felt more productive, right? 96% actually felt they could work faster on repetitive tasks, or 73% of them felt they could do better in terms of how they maintain software or what have you, when they did research in terms of systems development, right? When they use generative AI tools, that was kind of the report that came to, right? So generative AI tools have made programming more accessible, no doubt, to many people, and then hence it will enable more users to make or create new objects, create new projects that might lead to creation of even new roles in the future from a software development point of view, right? The evolution of these models has lowered barriers, if you will, to using low-code, no-code development tools to leverage such large language models like ChatGPT and what have you, and potentially lead to birth of whole new class of intelligent developers, in technology. Think prompt engineering or response engineering. These are two that are very popular these days, that are becoming more and more, clarity, that are becoming more and more clearer as we move forward. Think about, in terms of prompt engineering, is a role where engineers are becoming experts at how to use these large language models in being able to ask the right question, in being able to formulate the right queries, in the right, giving the right, the best inputs, if you will, using the right APIs, in being able to call some of these models to be able to answer the questions they may have, whether that is through an integration of code or whether that is through a straight interface. Again, same thing in terms of ability to be able to handle the output that comes from such models. That is something that we refer to as response engineering. Outputs of these models are not always in a consumable form as to how you can actually consume it. So it is essential to be able to understand, how do I take that output and be able to present it, to a user in a way that it is mapped to, whether it is mapped to my data models or whether it is mapped to the right, formats of user interfaces or what have you, to be able to show it in a meaningful fashion. So we call this prompt engineering or response engineering, which are getting more and more clarified over time, right? So, the generative AI and low code, platforms that have proliferated, as I should say, in software development, they tend to, they do help achieve, a lot of these strategic goals, to be more productive, innovative, and then better experience, for that matter, for their consumers, right? Um, with the advent of such advancement in technologies, new roles and opportunities, like I talked about, will continue to emerge. And then some of the impact on developers, I could potentially describe, in terms of, you know um, in terms of how it could impact, and software engineers' role. Right? Think about it in terms of software engineers should be able to shift focus to higher level tasks. They don't have to do the same repetitive things, and then they can, leverage these tools to be able to do them faster, so they can focus on higher level tasks. They can think about rapid prototyping to be able to iterate and then get to the end game much faster, be able to do that experimentation, to be able to collaborate with non-technical business stakeholders, like I talked about earlier, that can provide a much greater understanding of the market needs or the, client use cases or what have you. Ability to be able to integrate with AI capabilities within their applications, for that matter, right? They can bridge their skill gaps that they may have without necessarily, leveraging some of these tools. They can bridge their skills gap, right? And it will help, I think, generally in continuous learning and adoption, for that matter, right? So the role of software engineers, in my mind, continues to be crucial in designing robust architectures, in optimizing performance, ensuring security, building reliable, scalable systems, and addressing any complex software engineering challenges. Those are not going to go away. These technologies act as tools that augment, that augment the skills and productivity of software engineers, enabling them to do much better as we move forward. Right, and then that's kind of, what I would say is the impact into a software engineer's role.
Hey, thank you so much, Deepak. I think that very well summarizes the overall theme that we're actually, we started the conversation with. And thank you for doing this with us, Deepak.
Awesome. Thank you for the opportunity to be, to be on this important, podcast. I really appreciate that, Shikriti. And then look forward to doing more of these. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Thanks once again, Deepak. Audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you've made notes of what Deepak has just mentioned about, you being the engineers and the role and how you can upskill yourself, especially. Apart from the important pointers that, he emphasized upon the reevaluation of the current software development arena and the AI empowerment that we spoke initially. I will be back with some more tech podcasts. Stay tuned to Tech Gig for all the latest tech happenings. Thank you so much.